Looking for the best decks in MTG Arena Explorer Best of One? Well, you came to the right spot, because here we do a weekly meta game breakdown where we look at the top performing decks on the MTG Arena ladder. But you're like, where do you get this data from? Well, we get it from UntapGG, companion tool that runs alongside Arena's client, aggregates user win rates, gives us a whole bunch of cool stats. You could track your own win rates and get a whole bunch of collection tools and stuff like that, as well as some limited features. If you're doing drafts, stuff like that. Link for Untapped is in the video description. I'll timestamp and paste all these deck lists in the video description as well, so you can jump around as you'd like. So before we jump into it, I do want to kind of put on notice, if some folks weren't aware, August 26th is the next scheduled ban and restricted announcement. This doesn't necessarily mean that there will be a ban or restriction, but it's heavily speculated that the format may see one. My question for you is, what do you think should or deserves in terms of warranting a ban in the format, if any, or potentially unbanned? So let me know in the YouTube comments. So we're going to look at the popularity of the decks first in terms of metagame distribution, who's playing what in terms of density, and then we'll look at Platinum to Mythic win rate data in terms of what the decks are playing. So from Platinum to Mythic right now, we have 14% Amalia, 8% Azorius Control, Mono Red is about 7%, then Devotion 5%, Mono Black Discard 5%, Golgari Food. A new combo deck, which we'll cover, is at about 5% as well as Selesnya Angels and Rakdos Vampires. So pretty like glut in terms of like the 5% range, and then Abzan Amalia being the most popular. So if we look at the week that I'm going to look 2 weeks since the new format came out, just to give us a nice kind of breakdown. 41,000 games were played over the span. The highest win rate deck from Platinum to Mythic right now is actually Gruul midrange, surprisingly enough, 75%. So this is what was previously referred to as Gruul boats, because we had Skyship Sovereign. We've kind of cut down the curve. This is a deck I also own in paper, but then converted to the Gruul Blitz version of the deck. So you have Vehicles in Eska's Chariot and Smuggler's Copter. You have Accelerants in Elvish Mystic and Llanowar Elves, which help you get ahead on curve. So you could do something like turn 2 Reckless Stormseeker, turn 3 Haste Out and Eska's Chariot, which is very powerful. You have 4 of Rampaging Ferocidon main that will help you with the Amalia combo, Odd Angels deck, stuff like that. Bone Crusher's removal. We have a new card here in Paw Patch Recruit. So whenever a creature you control becomes target of spell or ability, you put a 1/1 counter on another target creature you control. Also has the Offspring ability. So for 2 additional mana, you can make a copy of it that's a 1/1. This copy can also be copied with Eska's Chariot. Inti for some card advantage, card selection, as well as trample, and then some Chandras on the top end as a grindy element removal or some card advantage as well. From there, we go to a different type of Gruul. This is Gruul Aggro, kind of blitz at 69%. Nice. So this is basically mono red Splash Atarka's Command. So we've seen variations of these kind of all-in decks. This one's leveraging Burning Tree to kind of go ahead. You have 2 Dreadhordes, 2 Emberheart Challengers. Be interested to see. I think maybe just going Emberheart might be better since it's the card advantage, and it's or that way like pretty much everything in your deck has haste, or at least can be threatening in terms of prowess and stuff. Slick Shots, you have Scamp in here that can be flung or like sack itself. You have Swift Spear and Soul Scar, and then just a bunch of pump effects. Infuriate in here. You have Kumanos, Monstrous Rage, Titan Strength, and then Atarka's Command can anthem your whole team. So just very aggressively slanted deck. Abzan Amalia. So there's varied configurations with this deck, I would say. Kind of what you want to slot into each spot, but the core concept of this deck is the combination of Wild Growth Walker, Amalia Benavides, and anything that triggers a life gain creates an infinite loop of exploring, gaining 3 life, exploring, gaining 3 life till Amalia gets 20 life, 20 power, and then it sweeps the board of everything else. You can set up your draw through the scries, put Aetherflux Reservoir on top, so if you can't kill with just an attack that turn, you can shoot them for 50, or if you have Dina out, it's another way to drain your opponent. There's the new Bat with Offspring that does a similar thing to Dina that drains as well. So there's a couple things like that. There's a new card from Bloomburrow, it's a white sorcery that can reanimate. You sometimes see Lively Dirge in here as well. So this version's playing Helping Hand as a reanimation effect. Case of the Uneaten Feast is another life gain enabler. Synod Scout and Sentinel can trigger Explore, which then starts the combo as well. Return to the ranks as a reanimation effect. This one's on like Fauna Shaman to help find you combo pieces. Collected Company, you'll sometimes see Court of Calling in these lists. So there's a lot of kind of configurations in terms of how you want to set up your combo. Pretty much like once it's a bunch of ways to find the combo, a bunch of ways to reanimate the combo, and kind of went through that route. Izzet Ensoul at 68%. So this is an artifact aggro deck. So you have a bunch of creatures that incidentally make artifacts. Voldaire and Epicure, Spyglass Siren. Those will then provide value to something like Ensoul Artifact, which can animate it. You can Ensoul Artifact as well a Darksteel Citadel, and it becomes indestructible. Case of the Flinch Falcon is another way, once you solve the case, that you can then reanimate a spell. Spell Pierce for Disruption, Torch the Tower as a flexible removal spell. Gleaming Gear Drake can get bigger over time, and it makes another artifact. Inti, you have big creatures. Well, then let's give a trample and some card advantage. Also plays well with Smuggler's Copter. When you get the discard off Smuggler's Copter, you get to get a card from exile. Legion Excruder is a way to kind of have damage, and then late game you can sacrifice those miscellaneous artifacts for value in that regard. Shrapnel Blast, sack any of your artifacts to deal 5 damage to any target, and then Cryptic Coat as kind of a value grind engine. Then move to Azorius Control, so 66%. Just in this deck here, lots of different removal options. Smites, March of the Otherworldly Lights, 3 steps ahead is counters. You have like No More Lies, Dovin's Veto is counter, Get Lost. So basically counter kill, full of lockdown for the aggressively slanted meta. You're winning with Sunfalls, tokens, Wandering Emperor, Teferi, your opponent's hopes and dreams being shattered, Castle Arctic all the Storm Giants. Basically kill or counter everything and then win through your whatever win condition you want. There's a lot of utility lands, the Emperor, stuff like that in this list. Rakdos Sacrifice. So this is a cat oven kind of engine. So Cauldron Familiar, Witch's Oven, creates a loop every turn that you can gain and drain. Pair that with the Mayhem Devil and you can start pinging things. This version is playing a new card in Scavenger's Talent. Whenever one or more creatures you control die, you create a food token. This ability triggers once per turn, so it gives you some additional food, some additional sack fodder. Whenever you sacrifice a permanent, target player mills 2. So this can either be done proactively to help you find your cats, or it can just be used as an alternative win condition. You mill out your opponent that way there if you can get enough cycles through. And then the last mode is basically like a reanimate through. So if you kind of mill over a bunch of stuff, you can bring back like Mayhem Devil, stuff like that. Pushes removal, claim steal their things, and then sacrifice them. Deadly Dispute, Village Rights gives you card advantage. Croxa for like a more redundant kind of reoccurring graveyard threat. Sweepers, some Fables in here. Carries this version's playing a bit more in terms of steal stuff. Kolaghan's Command is a flexible kind of option there. Probably want like full 4 Fable. Card's really good. Spirits, so 64% for Azorius Spirits. So this is a mainly base blue deck that splashes white for Catilda, which scales based on the number of spirits you control or enchantments. And then Spell Queller as kind of a pseudo counter spell that doesn't really counter, so it gets around stuff like Spring Verdict's uncounterable clause. Invasion as a way to eat at your opponent's hand and then eventually protect your team. Then it's just a bunch of like tempo-oriented spells. Rattle Chains lets you flash in your spirits with flash and can also be a protection spell. Curious Obsession draws you cards. Mausoleum Wander is a counter spell in a way. Slip Out for protection. Spectral Sailor is a mana sink. Spell Pierce for disruption. Lofty Denial. Shacklegeist can tap down stuff. Supreme Phantom as a lord. Geist Snare as another cheap counter in the deck. So new combo alert time. So 64%. So this one is a Golgari food combo deck. So Yurga, Eater of Vault, as other food creatures are foods in addition to their other types. So basically, Cauldron Familiar sees itself as a food. So if you have 2 Cauldron Familiars, one in the graveyard, one in play, basically you could sack the one in play to return the one from the graveyard and create a loop and then drain your opponent out infinitely. It also makes your Yurga infinitely large. So the deck is focused around self-milling. We see the Scavenger's Talent again. You have Stitcher Supplier to mill yourself, cash grab, just ways like that. And then you basically just set up to get back the Yurga and then create the loop in terms of milling them out. I will say this mana base is very poorly constructed. There's no Overgrown Tombs here. You shouldn't be playing Field of Ruin. You're a combo deck. You're not a control deck. Not really something you should be concerned with. So I would say playful Blooming Marsh, playful Overgrown Tombs, and then trim on these basics. The Gyre Reach is fine, I guess, but even then I would probably just play more just dual lands in kind of that regard. You can play Hive of the Eye Tyrant if you want. Something like that could be reasonable. You then go to Azorius 9 Lives combo. So this is a control combo deck. So how it works is you have 9 lives. You get into play. You kind of disguise the Coveted Falcon, flip it face up, give the 9 lives to your opponent, and then you blow it up with Devastating Mastery or Farewell. This version's shifted to be a bit more control focused with Solemnity for the lock as well, and just a lot more interaction. There's versions of this deck that will play the full 4 of Coveted Falcon, full 4 of 9 lives, and then the full 4 of Devastating Mastery. This one's going for a little bit more control orientation. You can also, with 9 lives, if you have the 9, like the 9th damage trigger on the stack, if you could go to full control and then donate it to them with Coveted Falcon as well. You then go to Rakdos Vampires. So this one's at 59%. Deck that's probably a little bit better suited for best of 3 since it's flexibility, but core of the deck is Sorin, down ticking, putting into play Vein Ripper to kind of make your opponent very frustrated with a 6-drop coming into play on turn 3. This one's a little bit more mid-range focused. We see the Archfiend of the Duros as another undercosted beater to close the game out fast. Bone Crusher Giant is removal. Fable, just flexible card. Torch Tower is removal. Fatal Push. You have a bunch of discard as well. Go for the Throat and Harvester as kind of bridge cards to help you get to your combo in late game. And then lastly, we have Selesnya Devotion. It's basically mono green Devotion, Splash Elish Norn. So this is a deck that is heavily leveraging Nykthos Shrine to Nyx. This is another deck that I'd probably not play Field of Ruin. You're kind of a combo control deck. You need to hit, you have like multiple cards that are, 2, 3 greens. You can't really afford the Field of Ruin. I understand like with Leyline, you can technically make this any color, but if this isn't in your opener, it's a bad time. So just play either more forests. In this case, I would say would be the easiest thing. The core of the deck, you want to ideally have Leyline in your opening hand to put into play for free. You have a bunch of accelerants. This is a deck as well. Like this configuration's a little weird, to be honest. You should be playing the full elves and stuff like that, but I'm going to see if I can find a better devotion list. This one seems a little all over the place, to be honest. You should be playing the full elves. They're very powerful. You should be playing the full Old Growth Walkers, the full Outcaster Trailblazer. This one's kind of like, seems like it's piecing together cards that they're missing. So I'm going to find a little bit better of a version, but even something like this, not optimized, is still putting up a reasonable win rate. So that's it for the week. Let me know what you think. We'll catch you next time. Thanks for watching.